When you launch Photoshop, that's the first thing you see. And we are not going to look into the latest, greatest tools, the AI, the generative fill, even though they're used a lot in the industry. That's something for the next class, for Art183. But I'm going to explore with you Photoshop, the beginning of it, and try to find ways to kind of get you started with not just any tool, but in particular selections. Selections are really important in Photoshop. So here you find yourself in this interface and you can hit new file, obviously. Command N is the shortcut. You'll see I'll teach you a lot of shortcuts because I love them. And right in here, you can choose which format you want, right? The default is, and actually this is not probably the default, is the last thing I did. Probably the default, I would imagine, is a letter size sheet. But depending, whatever you want to do is what you choose, right? Like if you say, okay, I want to create something for print and I need a letter size sheet, there you are. You go under print and you choose that. And as you can see, it turns right here into 8.5 by 11. Resolution for print is generally 300 dots per inch, and it's really important that you understand 150 is enough. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there will be times in which you're creating a composition, you need an image, and you find something online that is usable. Those don't often come at 300. So the resolution of 300 is the ideal resolution for printing, but 150 is just as well working fine. It really depends, obviously, if you want to print for putting on an art gallery wall and it has to be super top-notch quality, that I doubt it is most people's case, then you do want 300 or above, but mostly is fine at 150, just in case. And again, you can actually choose different sizes. Again, everything in print is 300 PPIs. By PPIs is pixel per inch, and we'll talk about the difference between PPI, DPI, different resolution. What is resolution? I will tell you in a second. Let me start the file, and then it's easier to tell you when you're seeing it inside Photoshop. Obviously, you can decide you want to actually create a composition for web, right? You're creating a website. So you're going to go in the web modality. And you notice the resolution now has gone down to 72. That is absolutely the standard. And you can decide which screen format. The most common, actually, denominator is the 1024 by 768. But again, depending on what you're doing, what is your intent, it might change. As I said, if you're play it safe. If you don't know exactly, but you want to put it online, go with this option, the 1024 by 768, and you can see this has changed to the right size and to the right orientation. Obviously, the printing is the portrait orientation, the web is landscape orientation, and then you can create stuff for mobile or cell phones, iPads, or for film and video. Let's, for the sake of simplicity, stick with the print and letter size. Also here we have different color spaces, right? You can have a grayscale, and everybody knows what grayscale means. You need to start black and white and everything between. RGB is the mix between red, green, and blue. The CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And then there's this beautiful color called LAB that is luminance, alpha, and beta. And the reason why I call it beautiful is because in the old days, everything for print was CMYK, everything for screen was RGB. Now, in 1998, we have a new world called color management. So all the industry, that means all the industries that deal with digital output or even input, from Apple to Microsoft to Epson to Fuji to Canon, just you name it. All of the industry that are involved with digital image production came together to come up with a global standard, so that no matter if you start from RGB or CMYK, your file, eventually there is a printing profile and a intermediate space that translate everything. That is this LAB, by the way, and it's just really a very flawless operation now to print. Now, obviously, all this started because the printing colors, whatever you had on the screen, did not turn out to be the same on paper. So they said, okay, let's come up with a golden standard that we all understand color the same way. It's a really big topic. If you do want to go into printing, definitely taking a class in color management systems is a must. No matter if it's in the GRC department that offers them, but they're pretty impacted, or even online. Let's stick with RGB. RGB is a larger color spectrum than or gamut than CMYK. That means you will obtain a lot more colors by mixing red, green, and blue than by mixing cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So that's why I tend to stick with RGB, just because I have more colors. I got more under my belt, more options, more, power. And then obviously the background can be white or transparent or black or whatever you want. Here's the story of the color profile. Do you remember when I told you now whenever you create a file, it comes with this color profile, and then when it gets sent to the printer, gets translated, so that everything goes flawlessly. Just to give you a proof that what I was telling you is right, you see you have Apple, Adobe. If I go and scroll down, you'll see eventually Epson profiles. And my point is, there it is, Epson, Fujifilm. You see what I mean? That most of the most amazing thing, the Kodak right here, is that whenever the effort started, everybody got Panasonic. You see that there are a lot of different companies, Sony, that got involved to come up with their own profile, so that the images you produce, if you assign the correct profile when it's time to print and to output in general, everything will be the way you want it to be, right? Whatever colors you pick on the screen are going to end up being in the output. So that's a long story about color management, but is actually just a tiny bit of it. There is so much more to know, but I want you to have a little bit of an understanding. Whenever I open any interface, I teach you any tool, I will not tell you just push the button. I will tell you, what does that do, right? Behind the scene, why is it important that you push that button or that you make that choice? So RGB is because it's a larger color spectrum. I have more colors at my disposal. I'm going to have just a simple white background because it's easy and is an output for print, the most standard letter size at 300 pixel per inch. Let's go and say, and by the way, square pixels right here. Now you could choose something else. Let's stick with something simple. But what are pixels? And that's when I told you, hey, look, I'm going to show you in Photoshop because it's the most clear. And many of you already probably know, but let me choose a nice loud enough color and hit the B for brush and hit the square bracket to make my brush bigger. So the right or left square bracket allows you to make your brush bigger or smaller, right? And right here, I have all my palettes. Right here, I have all my tools. And in the palettes right now, I have, this is the history. You have different options. The colors, as you can see right here, the swatches, there are pre-made colors. And on this side, you have the most important palettes that you want to use, and layers right here are really, really important. If you want to create a new layer, that I generally do when I create a new element in my work, you hit this plus sign. In fact, let me pull the layers out. They're even more important than the colors at this point. So you can see that I can hit the plus sign right now. I have just the background color and is by default locked. By the way, I generally unlock it by double clicking on it, because if you leave it locked, it can do strange, cause strange result. For example, if you use the eraser on it, instead of deleting, it actually creates a black mark on it if it's locked. Versus if you unlock it, then it does behave the way it should. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to go in and create this kind of like doodly shape. And then I'm going to zoom in to show you what are pixels, right? If I go really, really close, you can see those beautiful square little element. Those are pixels. What is resolution is how many pixels you have in an inch, right? That's resolution. And if I actually go with a bigger brush and even softer brush, look up here, I can choose my brush. And right now I have a pretty defined brush. I'm going to go with a soft and round brush, and I'm going to create another doodle for the sake of it. Oops. Right here, let me actually go a little bit smaller. I'm really big, and kind of create that. And then you can see the difference in terms of, when you have pixels, you end up, when you have curves, with this kind of jagged effect, right? Especially if you don't have anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing, we'll do it in a minute, is a transition between colors. So for example, if I decide I want to create a shape, and in a minute right here, you can create all the shapes in the world. I'm going to create an ellipse, click and drag. I create my ellipse. Another thing I can do, I'm going to do Command Z to undo it, is I can say I'm going to put a little feather to it. Feather means it create kind of more like a soft effect around it. I put 10 in here and I hit enter, and then I create my ellipse again. Now when I want to fill it, again, I'm creating another layer and I do Option Delete to fill it, right? You could also do Edit Fill, but I love shortcuts. Option Delete, by the way, I'll prove to you that Edit Fill indeed exists. But Option Delete will fill it with the foreground color. And now let me show you what anti-aliasing is when you have an effect more like this. So you have the color you picked, the color of the background, and this in-between effect, these in-between colors that the software generates for you. That's called anti-aliasing. And generally is, by the way, the default for most software, because it makes the viewing of the object a little bit softer on your eye. Just look at the difference between this and, sorry, I'm zooming out, and this, right? This is really harsh. So I just wanted to let you know that depending on the brush you choose and the operation you do, you can end up with this aliasing or anti-aliasing effect. Again, aliasing or hard aliasing is when you have a sharp contrast between the color you chose and the color of the background, just like here. And as you can see, these are the pixels, right? They're little square elements that Photoshop hinges on to create any work. And be aware that when you have diagonals or curves, those can be more visible. Now, also remember, we're looking at it right now at 600%, you can see down here. So if you double click on the magnifying glass, that's really how you're going to look at it. But as you can see, it does have sometimes this kind of jagged effect that is not the most pleasant. And then at times you'll use tools that actually allow you to do anti-aliasing, by which there is actually quite a contrast, quite a low contrast in terms of, there is a transition between the color you chose and the background. So that's kind of a little introduction to resolution, the fact that Photoshop is a pixel-based software. So everything hinges on squares, little squares, in which they are colored differently. Now, there's another technology that you should know that is called vector, in which everything hinges instead on mathematical formulas, right? So you have this math that creates the shapes. The vector, the queen of vector, is Illustrator. Now, Illustrator is mostly vector-based, and I'll go into vector deeper or better. I'll explain it more when we are in Illustrator, because it's kind of, that's the world. We will talk about vector a little bit in Photoshop too, though, because down here, all these tools down here are vector. So up here is all pixel based, and there's a bunch of tools that are color correction in between. And then at the very bottom here is vector. In fact, the pen tool, as you can see from the image that just shows up, allows you to create these Bezier curves, or these curves in which you click and click and click, and every click creates an anchor, and then the anchor is connected with a curve. So I could, in Photoshop, obviously click on that pen tool and then go in and click and click and click and click and create this beautiful curve. So that's vector. Now, why is Illustrator the queen of vector, though? Because Photoshop, even though it allows you to do vector inside the software, I generally call it fake vector, because when it's time to output your image, that means transform it into a format that goes on the web, that is JPEG or GIF or PNG, and we'll go into how to do that, by the way. Then it will turn the vector work into bitmap. Or if you hit the print button, same thing, everything it's called rasterize, and rasterize means it gets turned into a pixel-based shape. So again, we have mostly pixels in Photoshop. We do have the tools of vector, but once that it gets output, it becomes pixel, even what started as vector. So that's a kind of a bit of an introduction of Photoshop, and the fact that you have, again, these are the tools we're going to play with today, just the selection tools and how to create a few simple tasks. And then we'll do an exercise together by which we create a wrench from scratch. So we're not starting from photos. That is what a lot of times Photoshop classes start with, but I think it's kind of fun to show you that you have power to make your own image beyond just taking a photo and color correcting it. That is fun, but that's it. Versus you can do a lot more to it, right? And then I'm here to give you all the power I can give you, always. All right, let's close this video. In the matter of keeping everything short, I like to keep my videos to 10-15 minutes, and then I encourage you to go to the next one.